Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg. Welcome back to Hanging with Mangg. We are playing a little game here called RoboQuest, which is a relatively recent game. It involves, well, it's a rogue light first-person shooter. So, you know, like Dead Cells or something like that. You get random weapons every run and random perks and passive abilities and things like that. And you also unlock currency that makes you more powerful and stuff for subsequent runs. And it's got great music, very nice gunplay, and it's just quite a bit of fun. And I'm sure I'll have to repeat that a couple times throughout the stream. Yeah, so pretty much that. Right. What was I talking about? Probably talking about something. It just kind of wipes your mind. Right, so this week on this channel, what have we had? We've had Fire Emblem. We're on Echoes now. A few more games to go for that. And then we'll be clear of Fire Emblem for those that have been completely sick of that shit. And we've also had Rogue Trader, which will be continuing. Yeah, I mean, eventually I guess I'd like to get to a point in that game where I can just do some side stuff on my own, but so far we've been doing everything, so it's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be a pretty long playthrough, as expected. And that's kind of it. Lego and I are still doing Factorio, Warptorio kind of thing. I don't know if that's going to continue for much longer. We'll see. I'd like to actually... Well, I mentioned the possibility of us going back to Gloomhaven, because we did not finish the Gloomhaven campaign. That might be fun. We'll see. That's pretty much it for that. Now, I did have a couple ideas, actually, of some other stuff that I could play. One of them was, there's a new mod that's kind of been getting to be more and more popular for Cataclysm. Dark Days Ahead. And I actually thought it would be potentially really good for Archipelago. I wish I knew how to program, because I would absolutely be working on it, but I don't know how to program, and I don't really have much interest in learning. That ship sailed many years ago when I was a young lad. and I tried programming, and I hated it. So that's that. But the mode is called Sky Islands, and it's basically like an extraction shooter version of Cataclysm, like Tarkov. You start on this sky island where nothing can hurt you or anything like that, and you get sent down into the world, you know, into a randomized section of the world. And you have to then extract. You have to find the exit successfully and survive and get out. But there's a bunch of things that you can gather and find along the way, and I think there's more to it than that. I didn't really try it yet, but it sounded pretty interesting. It sounded like it could be adapted for Cataclysm, or for Archipelago, fairly well. So it might be interesting to check out. The other thing that might be interesting to check out, we were talking about this on stream last night, is solo RPGs. And I have a lot to say about RPGs this week, and we'll get to that. But solo RPGs, I've looked in the past into Ironsworn, and I've kind of bounced off of it like a couple times. And honestly, I think that's due to the fact that it's Ironsworn, specifically, like the setting, and not the fact that it's a solo RPG. You know, Ironsworn is like a Viking fantasy RPG. And it's quite gritty, you know, low magic, low power, northern wilderness sort of, you know, thing like that, and shamans, and yeah, that sort of setting. And that just does not interest me that much as a solo experience. You know, if my DM was like, we're gonna do Viking fantasy, I'd be like, all right, you know, let's give it a try, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, solo, it didn't captivate me too much. But I might be interested in trying out some other solo RPG, because they're growing more and more popular, and a lot of games are coming now with solo rules, and there's a lot of conversions. I mean, people are playing D&D 5th edition solo for some reason. I wouldn't do that, but some people are. So maybe more just like traditional fantasy, something like D&D, might interest me to try solo. But I figured that if I'm gonna do solo RPG, I'd like to stream it. I'd like to be like, you know, kind of when I do Tabletop Simulator, or when I play a lot of different games, I like to just talk through my decisions. And especially as a live stream would be interesting, just to kind of include the audience a little bit and consult them, and, you know, who knows what. It seems like an interesting thing. So I may look into some solo RPGs, and we may have a stream of that at some point. I think it's not as nerdy as LARPing, but just a bit more nerdy than normal tabletop RPG. So, you know, could be a fun extra thing that we do. So that's that. Mostly this week, though, I've played Factorio on my own, and I've been doing a lot of RPG stuff, as I said. I did finally, however, it's transitioning to exploring series, I did finally finish the Final Fantasy XIV video. It's done. It's uploaded. Will be released tomorrow. 2 hours and 53 minutes. And thank God is all I can say. Thank God it's done. I don't know if people will like it. Yeah, obviously there's nothing wrong with my narration or the editing. The music was kind of like an afterthought, I guess, but it usually is. It's more I'm concerned like the actual subject material. How did I get lost in this level? The patch quests are generally not that exciting, but I guess I thought that about Realm Reborn, and that ended up being a very popular video that people loved and wanted more of. So, yeah, I imagine people will like it if they like the other video. I'm just glad it's over, that's all. I still have not put in a whole lot of time into Final Fantasy Tactics. That's obviously not going to happen anytime soon. But eventually... Maybe it's better, perhaps, instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to do Final Fantasy Tactics next because that's a great story that I want to share with people. Maybe instead it's like, what do I feel like playing right now? What RPG or really what video game would I want to play all the way through and make a video out of? And then just do that rather than focusing on maybe the best story necessarily. It's not like I'll never get to Final Fantasy Tactics. It's just I need to be in the mood to play through it. That's probably a better way of doing it. I shouldn't force myself, I guess. But at the same time, I don't know what game I would be interested in playing right now. I don't know. We'll figure it all out. But yeah, bottom line, Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Awoken, the Realm Reborn patch quests. That will be released tomorrow. Choice, by the way. And I've never fought this boss before. I'm gonna die. Yep. Okay. That's fine, whatever. So that's all that. But really, I'm here to talk about RPGs. Because most of my time the last few days has been spent researching and actually running some RPGs. So back when Baldur's Gate 3 came out, I was playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3. And I was like, man, you know, people are saying this is like playing an RPG, like a tabletop RPG, but it's not. And I miss playing tabletop RPGs. None of my friend group wants to play. But I have family members that would very much love to play again if I DM. Maybe I should DM for them again. So that was months ago, of course. And I mentioned that to my mom, and she was very excited. It's like, okay, we'll do that. But due to jobs, seasonal job sort of thing, we don't really tend to play stuff as a family until the winter months. Now. So a lot of time went by, but here we are, and they wanna now play. Like, okay, fine. Baldur's Gate 3 allure has passed, but you know, I wouldn't mind, I guess, running something. So it was like, okay, well, what should I run? I don't want to start up any massive campaign per se. So we just want to run something pretty simple. And I looked at D&D, of course. I have run that for them in the past a handful of times. And I saw that they did have a new starter set. I still don't remember what it's called. Something about a dragon island. I'm like, alright, well, the starter sets are usually okay. So I bought that. And I started reading through it. And I'm like, this is going to be a mistake. These people haven't played an RPG in like a couple years now. And they weren't very good at RPGs back then. They struggled a lot with the different types of dice. They have no interest in reading any rule books or handbooks, or anything like that. So they're not the sort of people that will get excited about their characters leveling up. These are the types of people, and this is crazy to say, and I think it's pretty rare, but these are the types of people that you could remove levels and XP entirely, and they would be okay with it. There could be zero statistical progression, and they probably wouldn't even realize it. They're not the type that's going to be like, oh, I'm level 3 now. I can't wait to get this ability from this class that I read about. You know, and they're not the type to ask the DM, like, oh, can I run this subclass that I read. There was, you know, homebrew that I read online. Things like that will never have. They'll never read anything about this game ever. It's like, is D&D really the best system for a group like that? So then I, So then I started thinking about Maze Rats, which is a D6 system, meaning that it only uses D6s or normal dice throughout the entire game. Health is D6s, all rolls are D6s, damage is D6s, everything. There's no other dice used. Meaning that it's very simple, basic for anyone to try. And I have heard people say that if you want to introduce new people to role-playing games, that they've never played anything, they don't know anything about it, and they just want to sit down and be like, show, you know, what is this RPG stuff you do? Use Maze Rat. You can make a character in 20 seconds, and you can get started playing, you know, a minute later. There's almost no rule. It's a 6-page RPG, and half of that is just like DM information. No, more than half is DM information. Extremely simple but flexible. You know, you can run anything with Maze Rat. It's a very pleasant system, and I have used it in the past for them, and they enjoyed it, and all was well. And really, there was nothing stopping me from just using it again, which is why that's what I looked at. But then, I want to say the last thing that I ran for them was a system neutral or a systemless sort of sandbox setting called The Dark of Hot Springs Island. Which is just a big sandbox adventure thing. Oh, fuck me, I'm terrible. Well, I'm talking. Don't blame my skills. It's just a big island. It's a hex crawl, which means that you're presented with a map as a DM that is a bunch of hexes. And every hex has a few like key points of interest that are detailed in the book. So whenever the players go to a new hex or the same hex multiple times, there's different points of interest that they can find. And the book is not written for any system at all. There are no stats of any kind in the book. There's no like treasure parcels or anything. It's just a book filled with like characters and locations and plots and factions and stuff. Just that you can kind of run and adapt for whatever system you use. But it's really cool. It's a really cool island. There's a lot going on, and I don't remember why we stopped playing. Maybe I got frustrated. I don't remember. I mean, who knows? But we didn't run it for very long, and I did think there were some cool things that we did that I can remember. So I want to really run that again. Give it a good shot. So I'm like, okay, we can run Hot Springs Island, and I could use Maze Rat. But therein is sort of the problem. Maze Rat's greatest strength is also kind of its greatest weakness. Its simplicity. It's extremely simple. It's a D6 system, and the way that, like, armor works, for example, your AC. Your AC ranges from, say, 5 as being, like, unarmored, wearing nothing, to 9 being, like, nigh impervious, like a stone giant or something like that. You know, the toughest armor in the game is going to be like a 9. So 5 unarmored, 9 nigh impervious. That's very narrow. Health. You know, the weakest little basic thing might have like 3 health, or, you know, 1 health, if you really just wanted something you could step on, I guess. The biggest thing in the game, like an ancient dragon, whatever, might have 21 health. Again, very narrow. There's 3 stats. There's like strength, dex, and will. Those range from 0 to +4. That's it. And then there's an attack bonus for each thing that ranges from 0 to +4. That's it, really. Those are the stats for every creature in the game. And that makes it extremely easy to just whip up stats for any given creature on the fly in the matter of seconds. I mean, no problem, right? But when you have a big campaign filled with all sorts of creatures and things that are going on, it can lead to a lot of sameness. Which needs to be sort of made unique through the narrative. You know, obviously confronting a dragon is very different narratively compared to confronting a giant, even if they might have identical stats across the board. But I don't know, I was just a little concerned about looking at the stats and everything and comparing it all for something like Hot Springs Island. People have run Hot Springs Island, I'm pretty sure, with Maze Rats, but most would. So then started my great trek of looking at other systems that I could run. And it started and ended pretty much at the same place. It started with me looking at a game called Mangg. Mangg is from the same guy that made Maze Rats. It's very simple and free-flowing and flexible like Maze Rats is, but it's built to be compatible with OSR materials. OSR is old school Renaissance. It's a philosophy of design for RPGs nowadays that are directly inspired or based on original D&D materials. Basically, the idea is that D&D started as very creative and flexible, with like rulings over rules, you know, and then over time D&D has become less flexible and more codified and more, you know, it has strayed from its original design philosophies. So OSR attempts to bring that back, but in a modern way. So Dungeon Crawl Classics is OSR, and we've played that, and it's fun. And plenty of people still play just original D&D. because they think it's still the best. And it's kind of funny to think. Because unlike a lot of mediums, there is something still very much good and valuable about that original game. You know, it's not like video games. It's not like comparing Pong to, say, RoboQuest, where it's just like unrecognizable. I mean, there's a lot of recognizable stuff in original D&D. And pretty much, you know, you could sit down a group of D&D players that play 5th edition and have them play original D&D, and it wouldn't be incomprehensible, or it wouldn't be devastatingly old, where it's like Pong, you know? It's just like, what the fuck? This is going to be fun for like 3 minutes. Like, no, you could run a whole campaign, and it would be just as fun as, or more fun, really, than, say, 5th edition. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So in general, I would say I am sort of a fan of OSR. I like Dungeon Crawl Classics, and I like a lot of the stuff I've read about various OSR games. But at the same time, I'm DMing for a group of people that really could just get rid of XP and levels entirely, and all character progression. They could get rid of classes entirely and all that sort of stuff. They are not really interested in specific rules for climbing, or, you know, they're not interested in, like, the thieves' chance of hiding in shadows and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? That's not going to be interesting to them. They're not going to... Their eyes are going to glaze over if I tell them to write down that they have a 12% chance of hiding in shadows as a thief. And then, like, oh, hey, you're level 3 now. You have a 14% chance of hiding in shadows. That's not interesting to them, and quite frankly, it's not very interesting to me. I like Dungeon Crawl Classics mostly because of the spell system and how amazing and flexible and just wild it can get. I like that. I also am not interested in, you know, the thief stats or various things like that. So I began... Well, okay, so I was talking about Knave. Right. So Knave is OSR compatible, meaning that you could take an adventure, a module, written by Gary Gygax back in the 70s. You know, Tomb of Annihilation or something like that, and take a look at all the stats that are provided in that module, and you could run that using Knave without really doing any work of converting these to a different standard. You know, there's armor class, there's you know, hit dice, saving throws, that sort of thing. You can just run that. And OSR compatibility is a pretty nice feature. That means that there is just a literal mountain of material, modules and adventures and things like that, and bestiaries that you can just grab without any work and run. It doesn't help with Hot Springs Island because it's system neutral, but I still wanted something OSR compatible because we might move on from Hot Springs Island at some point. So I want to just have flexibility, and I want them to know a good OSR system. Am I looking forward to Metroid Prime 4? Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully the controls will finally be really good and solid and won't have, like, motion controls bullshit. be good. So, Knave definitely appealed to me as a system. Very light, very flexible. You know, these are the types of players that you can just give random magic items to that might be really broken in a competent group, but will just kind of be good in this group. Or like my sister. Every time she plays, she wants the same thing. She wants to be like an elven ranger that has a wolf companion. And when you play D&D or you play some other game that's very codified, there are very specific rules for animal companions so that it's not broken or, you know, it's not unfair to other players. This is the type of table that's just like, yeah, she wants a wolf, whatever. And then we just give her a wolf and we move on. And yeah, I mean, I usually will give some sort of stats for it, very vaguely, but nothing serious. Because it just doesn't matter. And, you know, I don't want rules for every little thing, because we just want to... no one wants to look through a book to find the actual rules for how to climb or how to break down a door or do anything. And sometimes I just want to give them a magic sword that they can use to make a giant hole in the earth. And, you know, I don't give them deliberately just, like, obscenely broken stuff. I put some sort of restrictions on it, like once a day or something like that. You give them pretty much the most broken goddamn thing in existence. You give them the Infinity Gauntlet and say, yeah, you can use it once a day. And it's just like, all right, that's balanced enough 9 times out of 10. For this group, I'm saying. Not for most groups. I mean, this group, like, you give them the Infinity Gauntlet, and probably just, like, once per day, they'll make a guy's head explode or something. That'll be it. And they'll think that it's the greatest RPG ever made. This is awesome. That's sort of what I'm talking about. So that's what I'm looking for. It's just a system that doesn't bog me down, that I can just give them pretty much anything they or I think of, and just can easily make quick rules for it without me looking through a rule book or something like that. And Knave hits all these things. I think Knave as written is not perfect for my thoughts. There's a few things that are just kind of like, eh. I can sort of see what they were going for. By default, your character stats, like your bonuses for all your 6 stats, will range at level 1 between like 1 and 6, with the most common being like 1, plus 1 to your strength, plus 1 to your, you know, things like that. But the DC, the number that you need to hit for any skill check using those stats, is 15. It's always 15. Which means that the standard character at level 1 has what, like a 30% chance, I guess, or so, to succeed at any sort of ability check. And even if you have a +6, which is very rare, to get a +6 in a stat, you have to roll 3 6s on 3d6. So to happen to have +6 in one of your stats, it's very rare, and that would give you 55% success chance on that ability check, which isn't even that great. And there's no rules as written for you being like, oh, you know, well, if you feel something is easy, make it a 10 or something, you know, something like. No, it's always 15. Which is wild to me because I think of Shadow of the Demon Lord, which also has similarly low numbers for your stats, like a +1 or a +2 or something. But there, the base DC for everything is 10. Which is nice. It feels nice as a player, I can tell you. That the number you need to hit is 10. Having to hit a 15 is like, oh god, it's oppressive. Now, I've seen people defend this and saying like, oh, well, you know, that's, you shouldn't be making that many rolls. The DM shouldn't make that many rolls happen, and the players shouldn't get into situations that instigate that amount of rolls. And so, when the players do instigate a dice roll, they want to do it with preparation in mind. They want to be prepared for this dice roll because they know that they need a 15. So they want to get advantage on that dice roll somehow. Things like that. It's like, okay, that's well and good, but my players are idiots, and that's not going to happen. So I'm going to change that. But anyways, I looked at many other systems after looking at Nave. So I was like, okay, what else is out there? And the current darling of the OSR community is Old School Essentials, OSE, which is not really, it's basically just old school D&D that's just kind of been cleaned up and a few things changed, but mostly it's just kind of the old school stuff. I also looked at DCC again as an option. I looked at basic fantasy RPG. I looked at something called the Black Hack. I looked at something called the Basic Hack. I looked at plenty of games inspired by Nave called Glaive or Brave or Karn. I looked at Into the Odd. I looked at Into the Dungeon. I looked at World of Dungeons. I probably looked at other things I can't even remember now. And none of them really captivated me entirely as much as Nave. There were a few things from some other games that I like, okay, I kind of like this. I might take this. Which is what most of these games are. It's just somebody played or looked at a bunch of other RPGs and was like, oh, I like this, and I like this. I'm going to take this and adapt this. And then they just publish it online. That's basically what all these games are. And that's why you get games called Brave and Glaive and other Knave plus I saw as well. Into the Odd and Into the Odd Revived and Into the Dungeon and all these kind of just riffs and hacks. It's a vibrant community. So in the end, I'm like, okay, I think Nave is really the one I'm going to go with. So I ran a one-shot with my mom. It was one-on-one, one DM, one player. And I ran an adventure, a mini adventure. It was from a supplement called Scarlet Heroes. It was written by Kevin Crawford, I believe. And that's a supplement designed to take any module or adventure and convert it to be run with a single player. By just making that single player much more powerful. Things like that. But at the end of that, there's a little mini adventure, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this mini adventure. I'm not going to do any of the Scarlet Heroes rules, because I don't want to confuse my mom. Like, oh yeah, we're running Knave, but these aren't the actual Knave rules. These are special rules, and later we're going to use the actual, like, no, just fuck it. I'll fudge some things and just use normal rules. And so it was a very basic adventure. Like, she just gets sent into this ruined village where there's a well, and there's said to be a toad god living in the well, and she wants to get the toad god's treasure. Like, very simple. It was a 2-page adventure. But she had a blast. She loved it. She absolutely loved it. She loved the Knave system and how flexible and easy and simple it was. And she loved that little mini adventure because, you know, I fudged multiple things, and she killed the toad god, and she rescued this little toad girl, and got her out of the well, and, you know, it was a happy ending, and she loves that sort of stuff. And she did a little combat, and, you know, she did some climbing and sneaking around. You know, she kind of hit on a bunch of things. I gave her a spell book, and she cast that spell, and I made it very overpowered for her. The spell was haste from the Knave rules, which by default just triples your movement speed for 10 minutes. I made it so that it tripled her movement speed and gave her 2 actions per turn instead of 1. Extremely overpowered, but it's like, fuck it. Who cares? Who cares? No one's gonna stop you. The DM police are not gonna come in and put you in handcuffs. Just let people have fun. God damn it. So yeah, she really enjoyed it. I'm like, all right, well, we're almost certainly gonna go with Knave, because it really seems like the best. I'm gonna change a few things that I don't care for, but I think like the initiative I don't care for either. But it seems like the best fit for this group, Hot Springs Island, and me as the DM. But then I kept reading and looking, and I'm like, I would be remiss if I didn't give Old School Essentials at least a try, because it seems like it's quite popular with the OSR community. So I started reading about OSE, and I'm like, this is a mistake. I don't know why I'm even doing this. But my mom was very eager to try another one-shot adventure, one-on-one. She really enjoyed that other one. So I'm like, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to try OSE and just compare. So I grabbed an OSE, an adventure module designed for OSE called the Jeweler's Sanctum. And this was obviously designed for more than one character. So I knew it was going to be tricky. I gave her a companion character named Frederick to just act as a hired sword. But even while making her character, I was like, this is a mistake. This is not going to happen. This is not going to work. With this group, this is not going to work. For exactly all the reasons I said. Like, she, you know, rolled her stats, and I'm like, okay, now you have to pick a class. And it's like, for most people, picking a class is like a joyful opportunity. Like, oh, look at all these options. But here it just bogs everything down. Whereas Knave, there's no classes. It doesn't, like, do you want to wield a sword? Grab a sword. Do you want to have spell books? Grab a spell book. Do you want to use a bow? Grab a bow. Done. You know, obviously there's stats. You're going to be better or worse at some things, but there's no system detailing what you can and can't use. If you want to wield a big two-handed sword and plate armor and grab a spell book, feel free. No one's stopping you. And then, like, all the stuff going along with the class, like the thief skills I was talking about, and especially like old school, like having elf as a class and dwarf as a class, and then elves in OSC, they have a 2 out of 6 chance to find secret doors, and it's like, God, it's so lame. I hate it. If the players tell me we look for secret doors, like, let them find the fucking secret door. And if you don't want them to find the secret door, don't put a secret door in your game. Like, that's the end of it. I don't know. Do you want your players to find the secret door or not? That's basically what it comes down to. And maybe they won't find a secret door because they don't say they're looking for a secret door. I know some groups are probably really anal about it, and every room they enter in a dungeon is just like, I search over this, and I look in every cranny, and I try and find every secret that this room holds. But the thing is, you're gonna know if your group is that type of group. And you can probably fuck with them in other ways outside of just finding secret doors. Maybe they do find a secret door, but it's a trap. Or maybe while they spend hours looking over every room, they get ambushed. Or who knows what other sort of things can be more interesting than a 2 out of 6 chance to find a secret door. That's just me. But that's RPGs. Every group, every DM, every player is going to be different. But yeah, I mean, I could already tell that I mean, character creation for OSE took like 10 times longer than it did for Knave, and neither one of us was really happy with it. Then we got into the actual adventure, and I decided to do fully grid-based combat because I didn't do it for Knave, and I wanted to just compare and contrast. So we set up a grid, and we set up the enemies. And her and Frederick got into a fight with a bunch of giant centipedes, and it was just, okay, you roll, you hit, you roll, you hit, they roll, they miss, they roll, they miss, you know, so on and so forth. And it's just like, yep, this is why I don't like D&D with grid-based combat, because that's what it boils down to 9 times out of 10, is you stand, you move your piece like a board game, you roll your dice and see if you hit. Oh, you didn't hit? Well, maybe next time, loser. Whereas when you do Theater of the Mind with a flexible, narrative-based system, it's like, it's so much more, there's so much more potential for creative outcomes to battles, and every turn, you know, is not just, I'm gonna smack it with my sword. You can still do that if that's what interests you, but I feel like when I have a character sheet that's really codified, like Dungeons and Dragons, that tells me all the things that I can and can't do, or the things that I'm good at or not good at, my mind is constrained by those parameters. I start thinking of like, oh, well, these are the things I could do, and these are things I can't do. I don't just let my mind sort of wander into a narrative space of like, well, maybe I could just like, I don't know, kick this giant centipede across the room or something, you know, and all sorts of things. You can start looking at the surroundings and just start. Theater of the Mind becomes more of a conversation with the DM, and you're just sitting there and you're thinking. You're not looking at your character sheet. You're just thinking like, okay, what's in this room? What's going on here? And what's on that wall? All sorts of stuff like that. Whereas I find, especially, this was the worst with D&D 4th edition. Because all it was abilities and powers. And so every turn in combat, all you're doing is looking at your character sheet and looking over your abilities. And obviously they moved away from that pretty quickly. But I still feel like that problem is in a lot of D&D and OSR games. Of just kind of looking at your character sheet rather than thinking about the situation. So, obviously, the main problem with that adventure and the one-shot was that she got boned during character creation. She ended up with only 3 HP max for her level 1 character. I didn't make up stats for Frederick, you know, but it was not a good situation. So, she did end up dying. It went on for a couple hours. She went through most of the dungeon, actually. She didn't get into that many fights. But, yeah, she ended up dying, and neither one of us was really pleased with the one-shot and the system. And it kind of just confirmed what I already thought of, that I was going to go with Knave. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I'm going to run some sort of one-shot or two-shot maybe for my family starting on Friday with Knave. I think it might be an OSE adventure, actually, because they do come kind of highly recommended. And they are OSR, so I don't have to worry about stats or things like that. And then after they survive that, maybe they'll hit level 2 or something. Some more health. And then I'll dump them onto Hot Springs Island. See how far we go. So that's that. Now I wonder if anyone has come up with solo rules for Knave. And maybe that's what I could do for a solo RPG. That would be fun. Solo RPG, it does seem like something that I would probably get into. Because I think about the times that I've spent with D&D and other RPGs, and like the time that I used to spend like designing an airship for our group and you know, outlining every part of it and organizing the construction and speaking with NPCs and hiring NPCs to be part of the crew and all sort of that sort of stuff. That just kind of would work great as a solo thing. I don't know. So you may see a stream of that sometime. Anyways, that's all there is about that. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk about OSR and RPGs. God, look at this now. Look at this. This is almost an hour-long stream. When was the last time I did an hour-long stream for Hanging with Mangg? It's all thanks to the power of RPGs. You get me on the topic, and I can just go and go and go. But anyways, we've got more Fire Emblem coming this week, more Rogue Trader, some more Two Brothers play, either with Factorio or Gloomhaven or whatever else we come across. Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Awoken, coming out tomorrow. I don't know if that will confuse people, because there isn't really anything in Final Fantasy XIV called A Realm Awoken. That's just what I'm calling the video. We'll see. But that's a big 2-hour and 53-minute video for fans of that game. And that's that. So, my name is Mangg. This has been Hanging with Mangg. I'll see you fine, folks.